Good evening, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for coming out. I know that there's also a basketball game, but we do appreciate you coming out and taking care of some business with us. Video of this meeting is streamed live on YouTube and will be also available on Facebook and the Village website. I'd ask that Clerk Saladino call the meeting to order and call the roll.
Trustee Augustine.
Here.
Trustee Gale.
Here.
Trustee McGee.
Here.
Trustee O'Brien. Trustee Peterson.
Here.
Trustee Thompson.
Here.
President Kugler.
Here. And Trustee O'Brien is absent. Although he's a Purdue grad, is not at the game. He is in Nebraska with his son at a father-son college matter. And so, as many know, the police department and the village suffered two unexpected tragedies with the passing of officers Stephen Rogers and Stephen Lapino. So I would ask everyone to join me in a moment of silence for the Roger and Lapino families. Thank you, and we'll have a few words as the meeting progresses on both those matters. But now I would ask Clerk Saladino to invite the audience to stand and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Please stand.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Clerk Saladino. We're starting tonight's meeting with a public hearing. It's the proposed fiscal year 2024-25 operating and capital improvements budget. Item 2A on tonight's agenda is the public hearing on the proposed fiscal year budget. The public hearing represents the last steps in the budgeting process. The next step in the process will be considering the budget for adoption at the upcoming village board meeting on April 22nd, 2024, our next meeting. The notice of the public hearing has been posted and published according to state statute. Copies of the proposed budget document have been available for inspection at the Village Hall, at the Public Library, and posted on the Village website starting March 11th. This evening is not the only opportunity for comment on the budget. Rather, it is welcomed throughout our year, and budgets do change as things develop. At this time, though, I would like to open the public hearing and ask if anyone in the audience has any comments regarding our fiscal year 2024-25 operating and capital improvements budget. And Director Micah can provide an overview, but I'll first open it up, and then after Director Micah, I'll reopen it if there is anybody that wants to comment. So seeing none, Director, if you could lead us or kind of tell us where we're at. Yeah, if we have a microphone, just for the people at home, it's probably the only way it gets recorded.
Okay. Overall, the proposed balanced budget allows the village to maintain its excellent service provisions to its residents, works to fulfill strategic plan priorities, invest in updates to processes, equipment, and the training of personnel, and aims to modernize the village's IT environment. Sound investment in road and sewer infrastructure and municipal facilities are also planned in this year's budget. The general fund is projected, fund balance reserve is anticipated to end at $13,313,009, or at 63.03%, which is in line with the village's fund balance policy. In the general fund, there's a continued transfer of $2.5 million to the capital fund, as well as the revenues have increased by 1.7%, or $716,267. The budget includes funds that are included to construct the large-scale stormwater relief project on 50th Street. The capital funds project has $7.3 million in projects that are budgeted. The parking fund includes the Lot 3 project. The equipment replacement fund has $702,400 in capital vehicles and equipment to be replaced. The police and fire pension funds are budgeted per the recommendation of the actuarial reports. The debt service fund includes the scheduled semi-annual bond payments which are due. The water and sewer funds are budgeted to sustain operational level, and the same holds true for the remaining funds, which are the MFT fund, motor fuel tax, the foreign fire fund, and the asset forfeiture funds. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Director Micah. And again, I would open it up to the public if anybody has any comments on our budget. Seeing none, I would ask if any trustee has any comment before moving on the budget. Seeing none, I would like to thank Director Micah and your team and all the department heads and other staff members that contributed to putting together this fiscal budget. I know it's a big project always. You jumping in when you did makes it even more difficult, I'm sure, the first time going through. So we appreciate your efforts, as well as all the department heads' efforts in getting such a thorough and good document. So with that, we will resume the regular meeting with the same members of the village board and staff in attendance. So continuing with the president's report, again, as we just had the moment of silence for Officer Roger and Auxiliary Officer Lupino and their families. These individuals were true dedicated members of the Grange Police Department. They served our community professionally and with the utmost integrity. At this time, I'd ask Chief Griffin if you have a few words to share.
Thank you, President Kukler. The men and women of the police department have been extremely saddened by the passing of Officer Steve Rogers, followed by the passing of Auxiliary Officer Lupino only a week later. Both of these deaths were completely unexpected and have been shocking to our department and our department members. These men are both gone way too soon and will
Police Department, as well as the Rogers and Latino families. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chief, and thank you for all your efforts and your department's efforts to make sure that both officers were appropriately honored. Their unexpected loss has been heart-wrenching for all of us. We ask that the community keep their families and friends in your thoughts and prayers. On a much happier note, this past Tuesday, I had the privilege of joining U.S. Senator Dick Durbin and Cook County President Tony Preckwinkle, as well as representatives of St. Cletus St. Cletus Parish Food Pantry and the Cook County Bureau of Economic Development. We met at the Greater Chicago Food Depository because St. Cletus was the recipient of one of the 3 vans that the county got. These are refrigerated vans that will allow St. Cletus to go to neighboring or grocery stores and get fresh meat and produce and be able to bring it back and distribute it not only at the St. Cletus Food Pantry, but a couple other neighboring food pantries. The St. Cletus Food Pantry is a phenomenal facility. It allows the participants to actually grab a shopping cart and go through the facility and pick out their groceries, and it really helps many in need. So it was a true honor to be part of that day's events. I congratulate St. Cletus and their whole parish for obtaining the new truck, and it definitely will aid in their missions. On tonight's consent agenda, there's 2 items related to the planned improvements for 47th and East Avenue. It's an intersection under the jurisdiction of Illinois Department of Transportation, and they are responsible for the work that will be done there. As part of the project, they've invited the village to participate in upgrades to the emergency vehicle signalization equipment, intersection engineering, and retrofitting streetlights and LED luminaries. We don't get a whole lot of say on what gets to be done there. That is their determination. As the plans show, that spur will no longer be 2 ways. It will be just 1 way, heading south, I believe. And those are things that really the village did not have much say on. We're hopeful that the improvements will make it safer for vehicle and pedestrian travel. I do want to emphasize on tonight's agenda, under the consent agenda, is also an adjustment to the village's backup prevention program, and that's a sewer backup prevention, either the check valve or the overhead sewer. In the past, we required 3 estimates for the village to participate in a 50-50 program with a homeowner. We're changing that because over time, we've heard feedback from residents. It's difficult to get 3 contractors. We're pretty much familiar with the contractors and their pricing at this stage, so we're lowering it to just 1. All you need to do is contact your contractor, and the village will pay 50% of the costs. We encourage residents that are thinking about doing that to do it in this fiscal year. We have the money available. These things, the money isn't unlimited. It will eventually run out. And we really do encourage anybody that's contemplating it to try to get it done in this fiscal year. Again, we're hoping with this change to reduce one of the barriers that seems to have been limiting some participation. So thanks on that. Today, hopefully this afternoon, many of you got outside for the solar eclipse. I myself had the opportunity to join some 2nd graders at Brook Park School, and they were quite excited to tell me that it was going to be 94% coverage, and it was quite a sighting. So hopefully everybody was able to see it, because Village Manager Knight points out that the next time we'll be able to do such a thing is in 2044. So probably not a problem for the 2nd graders, but us may be a little bit of an issue. With that, I know that Manager Knight has a manager's report, and we're excited to hear from Director Colby on the North Basin.
Yep. Thank you, President Kukler, and good evening, everyone. As President Kukler had mentioned, we have item A under the manager's report tonight is the North Basin Stormwater Modeling and Preliminary Recommendations item. In April of last year, the village board approved a task order with Christopher Burke Engineering to conduct a study of stormwater in the village's North Basin, which is the area north of 47th Street. Since that time, Christopher Burke engineers and staff have worked on modeling stormwater in that area and developing recommendations to mitigate the impacts of stormwater in that basin. The presentation tonight will provide an overview of those findings, respond to any questions you may have, and use the feedback from tonight in finalizing their recommendations. I'd like to invite Director Kobe to provide an overview of this work, who will be followed by a representative from Christopher Burke for the presentation.
Thank you, Village Manager Knight. Representatives from Christopher Burke will present the preliminary findings from the work and the modeling for the existing conditions in the drainage areas north of 47, inclusive of the Maple Avenue Study Avenue area, Ogden Avenue Study Area, Drainage District D. Ultimately, the North Basin Stormwater Model will serve as a tool in evaluating the cost-benefit of long-term and smaller localized capital improvements with the goals of ensuring that the village best leverages its investments in stormwater mitigations efforts. This will complement the ongoing stormwater modeling and efforts we have going for the area south of 47th. And again, the intention is to bring all these efforts together underneath kind of the overarching kind of capital improvement plans that we're working forward to set that roadmap. But without further ado, I turn it over for the technicals to Christopher Burke Engineering. Thank you.
Again, my name is Mike Burke. I'm with Christopher Burke Engineering. I'd like to thank Jack and Rick and Charity and President Kukler, Board of Trustees, for this opportunity to present. It's been a long road, obviously, for all of you, and we started about 3 or 4 years ago, and it's been a really fulfilling experience to be able to work in the village of LaGrange. So this is our title slide here. I have a few photos that I found online from various flooding locations in the North Basin. The one on the left is it's Sunset and Elm, and then the one on the right is an underpass near Ogden, Tilden Avenue. All right, a quick presentation overview. I'm going to go over the different drainage areas in the village of LaGrange, go over how we prepared our stormwater model, discuss the existing conditions, the current level of service, as well as the targeted level of service for the North Basin, and then discuss some preliminary concept improvements projects which we've developed for the North Basin, and then we'll close it out with some additional measures or considerations. So this is a map of the drainage in the village of LaGrange. As you can see, it's broken up into 4 distinct areas. The South Basin is shown in blue there. And then moving northward, we have the North Basin comprised of 3 different areas. Maple Avenue is shown in yellow, Ogden Avenue in red, and then Drainage District D study area in green in the northwest corner. All of the village of LaGrange is combined sewer, which means it handles sanitary flow and stormwater flow, with the exception of Drainage District D in the northwest corner. That has separate sanitary and storm sewers. When we start any model, the first thing we do is we look at the topography, and we divide up these project areas, these study areas, in distinct subbasins. So for each study area, we did this subbasin delineation, and as you can see here, we have a pretty good level of detail provided in there to, the different subbasins draining to noted or combined sewer locations in the village. So in Maple Avenue, we have 95 subbasins, Ogden, we have 36, and then Area D, we have 19 subbasins. And for each one of these subbasins, we calculated impervious areas as well as unique hydrologic features to determine how much of the rainfall is infiltrated in the ground and what is left over that's going to turn into runoff, which could, overwhelm the combined sewer system and ultimately result in flooding if it overwhelms the sewer system. Next, we look at the hydraulics. The main tool for developing this model was the village's very detailed combined sewer atlas. We modeled all, combined sewers over 12 inches and storm sewers over 12 inches in diameter. This encompassed every intersection in the village, so there's a high level of detail within this model. Over 600 structures and connecting sewers were modeled using XP Swim. That's the stormwater modeling software that we used. And the village sewer atlas is shown on the right, and the XP Swim model, village sewer atlas shown on the left, and the XP Swim model is shown on the right. And then this next map shows the overall drainage in the North Basin. We'll start with these combined trunk sewers. Those are the thicker black lines. We have a main trunk sewer running through the Maple Avenue study area on Cosset. That's the main drain through Maple. That ultimately flows north along East Avenue and then to a 72-inch trunk sewer outlet that continues into Brookfield and ultimately discharges into Salt Creek. There's also the start of the MARS project, the Maple Avenue Relief Sewer shown to the south there. That's the 60-inch MARS sewer there. And then moving up to Ogden Avenue, we have a 30 to a 42-inch, ultimately turning into a 48-inch along Burlington Avenue up there, north of the train tracks. And all these areas in Maple and Ogden drain to the Brookfield 72-inch outlet. Drainage District D, however, has that separate storm sewer system, and it all drains north, ultimately outletting into Salt Creek through a 24-inch storm sewer outfall. If the trunk sewers get overwhelmed and exceed their capacity, the next thing that the water will do is overflow into the TARP system, MWRD's tunnel and reservoir plan. That's the deep tunnel. And there's 2 drop shafts located in the North Basin. We have drop shaft C5A at Gordon Park, and then drop shaft 1 near the intersection of Cosset and East Avenue. So water will then go into the TARP system, and then if TARP, which has limited capacity, is exceeded, we start to see flooding. So the calibration storm we ran was the May 2020 storm event. That's the last major storm event in the village. We've been pretty lucky with weather the past 4 years to not have a storm event as significant as this May 2020 event. Obviously, there have been larger events that preceded this, but this one was about 4.5 inches over 24 hours, which is a 5-year storm event. And when we say 5-year storm, that's simply a probability, statistical probability that, this given storm would happen in a 5-year period. And then we have our flood depth map there. So this is a multicolored map, starting with the light teal or blue. That shows flood depths ranging from 0 to 0.5 feet, all the way up to purple, and that's flood depths over 3 feet deep. The yellow dots shown on the screen are reported intersection flooding. So the village has sent out notifications to residents to report intersection flooding, and then we map that. They map that using GIS provided to us, and we overlaid it on this flood map and found a pretty good correlation between the reported intersection flooding and the results of our model for the May 2020 storm event. All right, in summary, the existing condition model, when we ran our design storm events, we found that the critical duration storm was a 2-hour storm. And that's consistent with the short duration, high intensity events that the village sees flooding on most frequently. The existing level of service is less than a 1-year storm, which is 1.6 inches in 2 hours. So if we meet or exceed 1.6 inches in 2 hours, we start to have over a foot of water in the roadway gutter locations. And then beyond that, obviously, the flood depths just increase. The targeted level of service for the North Basin, similar to the South Basin, is the 10-year storm. So we developed concept improvement projects intended to achieve that 10-year storm level of service. Our projects are first primarily intended to reduce overland flooding. That's flooding that, obviously ponds streets, and then if it gets high enough, it will enter the low entries of a home through a window well. And then secondarily, to prevent sewer backups, to lower the peak hydraulic grade line in the combined sewer system. President Kukler just spoke to a great program you have in the village to reduce sewer backups. We're trying to prevent that globally by implementing or developing these capital improvement projects. Next, we looked at the severity of different flood issues, and that's based on the depth and then the area of spread of the flooding. And then for those flood issues, we looked at potential storage concepts, but they rely on the proximity to open space. We can't provide a project unless we have some sort of a place to store water. One of the main issues in LaGrange is there's no natural water body outlet for LaGrange. It relies solely on storm or combined sewer outlets at the municipal boundary into Brookfield, north into LaGrange Park, or there's a small portion of the South Basin that drains to the quarry. And then we analyzed previously developed projects. You may be familiar with the Maple Avenue Relief Sewer, MARS, and then the Ogden Avenue Relief Sewer that were developed in previous engineering studies on behalf of the village. The first flood issue that we're going to discuss is a significant flood depression at the intersection of Sunset and Elm. This shows the 10-year storm flood depth here. So we have a flood depth for a 10-year storm of 3.4 feet at the low spot there. And
Mike,
then,
if you could just repeat, because
of
the
course,
person who lives at Sunset and Elm just walked in, that you're now talking about Sunset and Elm.
no problem, happy to. So yeah, this is the first area that we're discussing a potential project for. This shows a 10-year flood depth map at Sunset and Elm with a 10-year storm flood depth of 3.4 feet at the lowest portion there. So pretty widespread flooding that extends all the way west out to Edgewood Avenue. And for this depression, we've developed a project to provide underground flood storage at the Lyons Township High School field to the west. And it doesn't show up great on this projector, but for those of you at home, I'm sure you can see it pretty well. There is a large yellow box in the eastern portion of the Lyons Township High School field that shows a 2-acre footprint of a storage vault. It'd be 5 feet deep, providing a total volume of 10 acre feet. And then we have a 60-inch relief sewer, storm sewer, that will collect any overland runoff that came to the intersection of Sunset and Elm and divert it into the storage vault at LTHS Field. After the storm event ends and the waters recede in the combined sewer system, water would drain by gravity back to the east and outlet into the Sunset Avenue combined sewer system. And this project provides a flood depth reduction of almost 3 feet. So you're left with a remaining flood depth of 0.8 feet there at the intersection. So it's a very effective project, and we'll discuss the cost in the last slide. Next, we looked at the Mars project, the Maple Avenue Relief Sewer. This shows the Maple Avenue study area here with the 10-year storm depth map shown. And I'll go back and forth a couple times. So the Mars project runs from 6th Avenue all the way west to Peck Avenue. So it's the yellow sewer shown on there, starting as a 24-inch, increasing to a 60-inch, tying into the Phase 1 Mars project. And we did analyze this in combination with the project I just discussed at Sunset and Elm, because the projects together provide an enhanced benefit of an additional completely eliminating the flooding at Sunset and Elm for that 10-year storm event. So there's the existing condition again, and I'll flip back to the proposed condition showing that flood depth reduction with the Mars project. I would be happy to. Not a problem. Just let me go back to this one. So just to be clear, the black and white line, the MWRD tarp, that is a tunnel running under the village of LaGrange, starting in the north area there, and then coming down Ogden Avenue, and then kind of crossing the railroad track and ultimately ending up at Cossett Avenue. The drop shafts are large diameter, exactly what they're called, drop shafts that allow water to overflow from the village's sewer system into that deep tunnel. All right, we just got done discussing Mars. Next is the Oars project, the Ogden Avenue Relief Sewer. This shows the existing 10-year flood depth for Oars. And then the Ogden Avenue Relief Sewer is the yellow pipe shown on there, starting as a 30-inch at Stone Avenue, and then increasing to a 72-inch where it would tie into the drop shaft, C5A at Gordon Park. And I'm going to flip back and forth a couple times to show that reduction again. So you can see there's some pretty significant flooding down at Wayola and Hillgrove that is significantly reduced when we install the Oars project. So this does require a permit from MWRD to make that connection to that drop shaft. The Mars project, conversely, does already have a connection that's restricted that could be opened up in the future to provide the full level of service. Next is the underpass flooding issues that we have at Ogden Avenue and Tilden Avenue. I'm sure you're all familiar when we get a big storm event. Those underpasses fill up and the road closure barriers go up. This shows that 10-year storm flood depth there. We have 2.4 feet at the Ogden Avenue underpass and 1 foot at the Tilden Avenue underpass. That's for a 10-year storm. And then with this project, we have 2 relief sewers, 36-inch pipes, draining both underpasses to a proposed storage vault at Gordon Park. That would be 0.8 acre footprint at a depth of 4 feet, providing a total volume of 3.2 acre feet. And then after this, when there's available capacity downstream, this would drain through a 12-inch restricted outlet back into the system. Next, we have a flood issue at Bell Avenue between Malden and Brainerd. And we have a 10-year flood depth there of 1.9 feet, pretty widespread, extending to a couple of blocks. And for this area, we developed the flood storage project at Park Junior High School. It's in an open parking lot right now at Park Junior High School. It's not showing up great on the screen, but this has a 0.7 acre footprint with a depth of 10 feet, providing a volume of 7 acre feet. This would have to be pump evacuated following the storm. And there's a relief sewer that drains through that flood depression to allow water to enter the storage vault during high flows. And then we looked at Area D. This is the separate storm and sanitary area I previously discussed. There are some flood issues throughout there, but they're pretty localized. In the deepest flood depth for a 10-year storm is 1.2 feet at Poplar into the north there. So it's not to discount these areas, but it's to say that, you know, they do have separate storm and sanitary sewers, so they're not at risk of combined sewer backups. They are at risk of some depressional flooding throughout. So we can look at some possible green infrastructure solutions to address some of those pockets once we finalize our study. In summary, we discussed the Sunset and Elm LTHS sports storage field. That was the 10 acre foot storage vault under the LTHS athletic field. Discussions with LTHS are underway. We've submitted for a MWRD Stormwater Partnership Program grant for that, and we're moving to the next phase where we have to make a formal submittal to them. The total cost of this project is $9 million, as shown with the 10 acre foot volume. Then the Maple Avenue Relief Sewer at a cost of $17 million. I discussed phase 1 is already built with a restricted connection to TARP in 2029. TARP is expected to be fully online, where that 30-inch restrictor would be removed, and we'd have a full 72-inch outlet into TARP, which would allow for that extension to be constructed. The Ogden Avenue Relief Sewer, we have not developed a formal cost yet, but we estimate that cost to be somewhere around $13 million. This would require approval from MWRD to connect to TARP, as well as IDOT approval for construction under Ogden Avenue, or Ogden Road. And then the underpass flooding project, where we provide storage at Gordon Park. That was the 3 acre feet of flood storage. We'd estimate that cost to be in the range of about $5 million. And this would tie into a restricted connection to TARP that already exists today, so there wouldn't be a new approval from MWRD for that. And then it requires IDOT approval for construction under Ogden Road. And then the Stone and Brainerd storage up at the junior high school, that cost is approximately $7 million, still yet to be developed, requires that pump evacuated storage tank, and also requires IDOT approval for crossing Ogden Road there. Some other considerations are green roadways or green intersections, green infrastructure in general. They are beneficial as they do promote infiltration. They're going to help reduce street ponding for lower, more frequent storm events, and these types of projects are often eligible for grant funding. Some of the drawbacks for these types of projects is they're costly for the benefits provided. So green infrastructure relies on storage in the base course of the roadway or parkway in which it's installed. So you basically put stone in, and as you can see here, I have a cross section showing a typical green infrastructure roadway. That base course provides about 35% void storage space, as opposed to when we put in a underground storage vault, that provides about 95% storage space, the 5% being the pillars that hold up the basin itself. Oftentimes, it does not provide sufficient flood reduction benefits for larger storms, and clay soils in our area can inhibit extended infiltration. Some additional considerations that the village asked us to look at is identify locations where the combined sewer manholes are at risk of the peak hydraulic grade line exceeding the rim of the combined sewer manhole, and install locking lids at those locations to prevent the surcharge of the lid being displaced from its spot, and hold it in place, because, you know, the combined sewer should not ideally be surcharging. Another good consideration is to install flow monitors at strategic locations to assist with the public works with flood preparedness, to allow readiness for installing barricades, alerting residents if we start to see the water levels in the main outlet sewer starting to rise. That would be a beneficial low cost project to install and help Rick and his team out. So that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to field any questions.
Okay, trustees, any questions? Mike, I had a couple. Could you go through and explain if we didn't do the LT storage and we just relied on the Mars project, did you look at that and what would happen at Sunset and Elm?
Great question. So the Mars project alone provides nominal flood benefits for Sunset and Elm. It would be about a half-foot reduction at Sunset and Elm. So it does not provide the level of service in which we'd want to provide at a significant flood depression like Sunset and Elm. We also looked at providing a relief sewer that would tie into the Mars project from Sunset and Elm running south to Maple Avenue. The problem there is the Maple Avenue relief sewer hydraulic grade line is higher than the ground at Sunset and Elm. So that makes it impossible to work against gravity like that.
So from looking at your map, is Sunset and Elm, is that the one purple area that we're looking at, or?
It is the deepest flood pocket in the North Basin, but there are other significant flood areas throughout the North Basin.
Okay. And again, so Sunset and Elm, the only real viable solution would be the LT field.
That's correct.
Thank you. You indicated putting a lock on the manhole covers to prevent storm surging, which I understand the benefit of that, except when that's locked, what's going to surge?
So it will still, there are inlets connected into the manhole. The difference is the inlets are typically connected by an 8 or a 10-inch pipe. So those will still surcharge. It won't just have that direct shoot, from a 36, 48-inch diameter manhole coming straight out the top of the main manhole lid.
But this won't negatively impact any homeowners?
No.
Okay.
No.
That's what I was concerned that instead of our street surging, we would have homes absorbing it. So.
Understood. And ideally, in some locations, I've even heard that the manhole lids for the combined sewer system are open lid. And you really don't, when you have sanitary sewer flows running through that sewer, you don't want open lids, for release of sewer gases into the air. It'd ideally be locked, sealed manhole lids. And then all the water can still enter that mainline combined sewer through the inlets at the curb and gutter of the intersection.
Okay. Any other questions? Trustee Augustine.
Yes, thank you, President Kugler. Thank you for this great presentation. It's exciting. A lot of us have been waiting for a long time to see what you've come up with. The Sunset and Elm flood solution that works because of this opportunity we have with the LT sports field is fantastic. It clearly will provide great relief to that hard-hit area. So I'm glad to see that it worked out. And thanks to you, Laura West, for helping to bring that to a lot of our attention. Thank you. And thanks to LT for talking with us, all of those good things. Interestingly enough, the solution that had been developed so many years ago to solve Sunset and Elm and a lot of the areas north of 47th was the Mars. And when I look at the Mars layout here, as you've and your firm has revisited the engineering of this, based on more recent flooding and all of our conditions, pipes and topography, I'm trying to see the difference between, one and the other. So there's a significant impact with the Sunset and Elm area and the field from LT. But what I don't see is a huge difference, as much as I certainly thought I would, with what we have developed for Mars, and I'm kind of surprised at that. And maybe I'm missing something, but that seems to be almost the same amount, with the exception of Sunset and Elm that's aided by the LT field. There's very little impact? Again, this is a 40,000-foot view, but can you tell me a little bit about what I'm missing here?
Yes, certainly. So from an overland flood perspective, there are some benefits to Mars. They're not as great as we had hoped to. But what we can do and what we will do in our final report is show what the peak hydraulic grade line reduction is for the Mars project. We usually do like a color-coded manhole to show, how much it's being reduced from existing to proposed conditions. And that's a way to see that benefit because it is still a combined sewer area. And if 100% of people don't have overhead sewers or check valves, they are still at risk of combined sewer backup. So it is a global capital improvement project to alleviate some of the other types of flooding as well.
I think just to elaborate on that, so I think what Mike's trying to share is the benefits maybe not shown, but this will reduce the hydraulic grade on the combined sewer, reducing a lot of basement backups. And where the graphic where that's looking more at overland flow, kind of the pooling, and it's not as much affecting a depressional area as much as it's benefiting the entire width of our village and hundreds of homes potentially. So still viable return on that project.
So Director Colby, just to follow up on that, you're saying that these graphs that Mike Burke was showing show the overland flooding, depressional areas filling up, streets filling up, where Mars, a lot of that benefit will be actually the combined sewers that are backing up into people's homes.
Actual reduction in the load on the system.
Well, that's great. That's really helpful because I think that's as much of a problem for people, and that is really most people's significant problems is their basements are ruined when these kind of storms hit. So thanks for the clarification.
Thank you.
Trustee Thompson.
Mike, thanks for a great presentation. Always great work to see from you guys. I know from one question we're always getting asked, and I know MWRD will ask this. Have you put in other studies have shown like a cost per home for savings of what this, like how many homes this will save in each one of these areas, and will that be put out later as we go forward?
That's one of the things we could certainly look at. We've done that in the past for the South Basin. So, oftentimes with projects like these, though, you might not get exactly what you're, hoping for. So the cost per home could be more than you had bargained for. I'm not saying it's gonna be $1 million per home, but sometimes it is $100,000 or $200,000 per home. But the impact for that given structure that was in and is now out of the flood area, that's kind of a zoomed in look at it, because you are now reducing flooding in the street. You're now, allowing emergency vehicles to pass through. There's other benefits and, other flood reduction that we might not see for larger events that we're not showing today. I mean, I focused on the 10-year event today, whereas the 100-year event would be more widespread, and there'd be homes in the outskirts of that would be in today's condition and then removed with a project like the Sunset Elm or the other two storage vault projects that I presented today.
Was the 2020 flood larger than the 2021 flood, or was it because 21 was such a short duration, maxed out the system, it just hit more homes and harder to track again?
I believe that the 2020 was the latest largest flood. So 2021 did cause flooding, but I don't believe it was as widespread as the May 2020 event.
Well, it was the flood that created a whole new world around it. But it was flooding in the north and the south. In fact, even Marie Newman said railroad tracks flooded out in 21. I don't think that flooded in 20. So
Okay.
again, it was fast falling rain that backed up in a hurry. So less amount over a couple of days, different impacts. So
I'll take a look at that too. I mean, again, we have not finalized this yet. These are our preliminary findings. So I'll look back at the rainfall gauges and run that 2021 event as well.
okay.
But we're focused on these design storms when we develop the projects. It's good to get good calibration though. So I'll certainly look at that event.
Okay, thank you.
Trustee Gale.
Thank you, Mr. President. So staying on this one with the, thanks for the presentation, by the way. Well,
Thank you.
Well done.
Appreciate it.
For the LT Field vault, if you will, have you looked at or considered the parts of the village south and west of it and potentially connecting those in as well, just because when I looked at Mars, similar to Trustee Augustine's point, I didn't see a whole lot of improvement once Mars got all the way back there. And I know I'm already anticipating we put in that vault and all the neighbors in that area will say, well, the vault, it's right there. And yet, I still get the issue I have. Yeah, so the south, yeah, exactly, like the south and west.
Yeah, we can certainly look at that. If I go back one more. Yeah, so that flooding there, we're looking at anywhere from, it's mostly less than 1 foot deep.
Right.
However, there is a rear yard pocket there that's a little deeper. So it's almost a matter of maybe we look at doing a, more localized solution there, running a side yard. Because I don't know if there's an outlet out there for that specific backyard depression today. And if there isn't, maybe it could be installed to alleviate that little pocket. But the rest of it is flooding less than 1 foot deep, so I wouldn't consider it to be as severe as the issue at Sunset.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it clearly helps Sunset.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Mike, if you could, while you have that screen up, assuming we're able to do this storage under LT Field, would it literally be one drain at Sunset and Elm and a pipe going to the vault, or how would it be designed?
Exactly. So I'll go to so you can see the arrows are actually pointed to the east. And what would happen is we'd have high capacity inlets at Sunset and Elm, and they would all be connected to the 60-inch pipe. And then if there is no capacity in the combined sewer system, water's going to start backing up through that 60-inch pipe because it's been appropriately sized to allow it to back up into that 10-acre-foot vault. And then after the storm, because it's sloped back towards Sunset Avenue, it would drain out by gravity through a restricted outlet into the Sunset Avenue combined sewer with a backflow preventer on it to prevent any combined sewer water from running into the storage vault.
Thanks.
Welcome.
Trustee Peterson, did you have a question? I wasn't sure. Trustee Gale, you're done with your? Done? Mike, thank you. I think it was very, very informative, a great initial presentation. I'm sure we'll have more details. We were excited to announce a few weeks ago that Congressman Caston came with $500,000 for flood relief. Congressman Chuy Garcia provided $2 million for flood relief. That's not for these projects, but the board's working very closely with our state representatives, especially our state senators, and we're very hopeful that we'll be announcing shortly similar type grants to help fund this specific Sunset and Elm project, or at least partially fund that. We're also looking for MWRD to partner with us on that project, and they've expressed willingness to do so. So the price is high. We understand the price is high, but we are looking to get funding to at least help a lot on that. And so far, those conversations have gone well, and we hope to have more to announce soon. So thank you.
Thank you, President Kugler. Board.
Mr. President?
Yes.
Sorry, I just had one last question.
Sure, for Mike?
Yes, sorry. It just occurred to me, and maybe I missed it. Timing-wise, this is built to coincide with the turf field that LT is creating. So, presuming we get the funding and we put it all through, can you refresh me again on the timeline of when that project is built? And the LT project doesn't necessarily need to wait for ours to be finished, piping-wise, but what are we looking at as a time frame on producing this relief?
I don't want to speak out of turn, but LT was ready to reconstruct their athletic field, I believe, this past summer or before.
Yeah, so LT's issued a letter of support for the project. We're trying to work together on those pieces. The next step for us is we're working with MWRD specifically on the Stormwater Partnership Program. We've applied initially. There's a separate deliverable due in May. And then we're working with our state senator representatives for the funding pieces there. As all those pieces come together, the design would then follow and construction to follow after that. That's a relatively short time frame within the span of a year. I think we want to kind of secure the funding and then figure out where it fits and sequence that. This would have to occur again before they would be able to construct the the remainder of their field. So they've issued a willingness to support that, so we're trying to stay in close communications to get this executed.
This tank would go underneath the artificial turf. It needs to, our tank needs to go in first.
Correct.
Yes.
Well, that's a remarkable piece of information, that they're waiting on this before they produce their project. We don't always see that kind of cooperation, so that's a great piece of information to know. Thanks.
Thank you.
Clerk Saladino, I'd like to request that you read the items under the consent agenda, followed by items appearing under current business.
Matters on the consent agenda will be considered by a single motion and vote because they already have been considered fully by the board at a previous meeting or have been determined to be of a routine nature. Any member of the Board of Trustees may request that an item be moved from the consent agenda to current business for separate consideration. Item A, a resolution waiving bidding and approving a contract with Minutemen Security Technologies for mobile license plate reader technology systems and services. Item B, a resolution approving the agreement with the Illinois Department of Transportation for improvements related to the intersection of East Avenue and 47th Street. Item C, a resolution approving a funding agreement with the Illinois Department of Transportation for improvements related to the intersection of East Avenue and 47th Street. Item D, an ordinance amending Chapter 78 of the Grange Code of Ordinances regarding parking. Item E, an ordinance granting a zoning variation for a shed within the required front yard at 10 Cali View Drive. Item F, a resolution amending R-2204, a resolution approving sewer backup prevention program policy, reducing the number of required quotes. Item G, minutes of the Village of LaGrange Board of Trustees meeting Monday, March 11th, 2024. Item H, minutes of the Village of LaGrange Board of Trustees special meeting Saturday, March 16th, 2024. Item I, minutes of the Village of LaGrange Board of Trustees special meeting Thursday, March 21st, 2024. Item J, Consolidated Voucher 240325, and Item K, Consolidated Voucher 240408. Current business. This agenda item includes consideration of matters being presented to the Board of Trustees for action. Item A, an ordinance amending various sections of the Code of Ordinances of the Village of LaGrange to establish an administrative hearing system. And item B, an ordinance approving an amendment to a special use for a plan development, an amendment to a final development plan, an amendment to a site plan, and modifications from the zoning code for 561 to 601 West Hillgrove Avenue.
Thank you, Clerk Saladino. At this time, I would ask if there's any public comments on matters on tonight's agenda. Please come up to the podium, state your name, address.
My name is John Pluto. I live at 718 East Avenue. A few of my questions are going to be for Mr. Burke. And how do we keep a combined sewer from contaminating a vault?
He already answered that, and he said that.
This is matters on the consent agenda, and I want to know if there's going to be sewer water getting back into that vault.
There'll be storm sewer water getting into the vault.
That's a combined system over there. That's one pipe.
Do you want to? Mike, why don't you stay seated and hear all the questions, and we'll see if we can address. But again, he already talked about the check valve. But go on.
Well, there's it's a combined system, so that water is contaminated out in the street.
All right, ask your next question.
Next question is, I had a little different idea of how that, let's take, if we had the picture up there, I could go to the Cossett Avenue sewer, and that dumps into the tunnel at Tilden or someplace over there. I was under the impression that our combination sewers dumped into the deep tunnel now. And in order to dump more into the deep tunnel, we have to get approval from the sanitary district to do that. So that means the Maple Avenue sewer, we would need to get their okay before we could open that up.
I believe.
And wait. We all know that nothing's going to happen until 2029, till the last reservoir is done over on the other side of the Stevenson. Our hands are tied, and we need to tell the people that. Now, you know, I agree, we have problems here, and we need to get them solved. But I don't want to put a Band-Aid on something or do something that's not right, because we've had poor engineering for the last 90 years of this village, okay? And I haven't even touched where I live yet, and that'll be coming up. So if he would like to explain, because I was under the impression that the overflow from the tunnel goes to Salt Creek over in Lyons. So we are dumping some of our combined sewer water into the tunnel project right now, and we're restricted on how much we can dump in there. And when we can't dump any more in, that's when everything gets surcharged and we have our problems. So
Okay, a couple of things there, and then I'll let Mike address that also. But as he said, there's a restrictor on the Mars tunnel. The restrictor is going to be removed in 2029 when the other quarry opens up for the deep tunnel. That will allow more capacity.
It sounded to me like they were going to go for a permit to get that done.
I believe Mike will tell you that we already have the permit. That the permit was done, when we got the permit to start Mars, we got the permit for all of Mars.
We only did part of Mars. The last
stops at
connection
6.
is, I'm just telling you what I read from all of your reports.
I'm not arguing with that, I'm just trying to answer your questions.
I've read every report that's been printed in this village, and that's not the way it is.
Okay.
I'll just start with the, no combined sewer in the vault. So the stance that MWD has taken, the stance that we take, is that when the sewer capacity is exceeded, water can no longer enter the combined sewer system. Then it runs over land and fills up these depressional pockets. That overland flow is then picked up and diverted through a storm sewer into the vault.
What about if our combined sewer is overflowing someplace and that contaminated water is running down the street?
So the idea would be to have locking lids on all the manholes that are at risk of that.
But it's coming up to storm sewers too.
Well, you mean combined sewers?
The storm sewer is connected to the sanitary sewer.
I understand, but it's at a limited connection. And really, I mean, if the combined sewer is at capacity, it's...
I think the vault is a great idea.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. But there's
I understand.
There's that question of contamination.
I get it.
Are we going to put contaminated water underneath a soccer field that has to be vented?
Well, it has to be vented regardless.
Yeah, it has to be vented.
Yeah, so...
So, I mean, we essentially could have a septic tank underneath
the
field.
Again, you got to understand, the only time this is going to fill up is when we have, significant rain events. This is not your everyday flows. So...
It's not an easy project to do.
Understand.
I understand.
And then regarding Mars, I think President Kukler answered that one. But there are no CSOs, combined sewer overflows, from TARP into any rivers around here. There are the 78-inch that runs from Brookfield, that has a combined sewer overflow into Salt Creek. But the TARP itself, that is a combined sewer overflow, basically. That's its own combined sewer overflow that discharges to various quarries throughout Cook County and then is treated before it's pumped out and discharged back into local waterways.
I'll tell you what, I'll talk with you about this later. Would that work out better for you?
As long as it's okay with President Kukler and Rick.
Yeah.
And Jack.
Because we could be here all night.
Thank you, John.
Hi, I'm Laura West at the lovely intersection, the purple intersection, Sunset and Elm, 140 Sunset. A year after announcing this study, I'm really, really relieved to see some pen to paper, some results from the study. It illustrates everything that my experience has been telling me. Sunset and Elm is not normal. This is an extreme corner, an extreme intersection. Trustee Gale, I know you mentioned to the south and the west, we are your retention. We are the retention for the entire neighborhood. It flows like rivers down all these streets to our corner, and our corner needs help. I actually can't believe our house isn't on stilts after seeing the illustrations. The photo on the front cover of the presentation is our corner. I think that was like a normal rain. It wasn't even a bad rain. I'm really grateful for all the work that's gone into this. I'm very hopeful that the village is making serious investments in literally changing the lives of residents of this town. LaGrange is a great town, like I've said before, and any investment in the infrastructure is going to make this place a great place to live. I think these maps may have looked different 10 years ago, which makes me nervous about what they will look like in 10 more years without some of these investments. So these projects are important. They're valuable. I am, just want to send my gratitude and express my hope that some of these go on in the collaboration with other entities. I recognize the hard work, and thank you to all of you and everybody sitting there for what you've done thus far. And anything I can do, please keep me posted. Thank you.
Thank you.
Randy Valenta, 19 South LaGrange Road. I want to compliment the appearance on the consent agenda of the proposal for Minuteman Security Technologies as a good step forward in alleviating and addressing some of the crowding problems that we have in LaGrange on those acute Friday evening, Saturday evening times in order to help alleviate parking and make sure that parking gets in the right place. As somebody that lives that every Friday and Saturday of the year, it really pains me to see people coming to our town and being frustrated by not being able to park or not finding a parking place. And I really want to encourage that we continue with the next steps on the parking study that helps make the village a more friendly place for people to come to. Thank you.
Thank you for your words. We appreciate it. Moving on to the consent agenda, can I have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda?
I move for acceptance of the consent agenda as presented in our packet.
Thank you, Trustee Gale.
Second.
Thank you, Trustee Peterson. And comments with regard to the consent agenda?
Thank you, Mr. President. I have two. One, my usual. As stated previously, I recuse myself from voting on any agenda items related to the village prosecutor. And two, I'd like to ask that we move items B and C from the consent agenda to current business for separate consideration. I have some questions about the intersection of the construction and the signalization at the intersection of East Avenue and 47.
So could you give me those letters again?
Sure. It's letters B and C on the consent agenda. They're tied together.
Okay, we'll remove B and C from the consent agenda. And do we need another motion, or can the motion just be amended on its face?
It does not get amended, but it doesn't need to. If any trustee wants to pull something off the consent agenda, it automatically becomes the first item after the consent agenda.
Terrific. So on our vote for the consent agenda will be A, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, and K. And with that, I would ask Clerk Saladino to call a roll call vote.
Trustee Thompson.
Aye.
Trustee McGee.
Aye.
Trustee Augustine.
Aye.
Trustee Peterson.
Aye.
And Trustee Gale.
Aye.
And that matter passes unanimously, so those items have now passed. We are now moving to the current agenda, and we'll start with Trustee Augustine introducing B.
Thank you, Mr. President. When I saw this show up on the consent agenda and read through the report, I was left with a few questions about what the construction will look like. We know that East Avenue and 47th is going to have signals put to it, stoplights to control congestion, and that problem area that many of us, all of us, I'm sure, are quite familiar with. But my concern was a couple things, mainly that I haven't seen a recent, we've talked about it at budget meetings, we've talked about it at various comprehensive plan meetings, but I haven't seen a new rendering, a plan for what this looks like and how the intersection might be changing. I did ask before the meeting and was able to have a look at an older plan that Public Works Director Richard Colby showed me, and that helped, and I may ask him to go through it. But what is changing at that intersection, we know some of our residents are concerned about the spur that comes off of 47th and onto, and you explained that at the top of the meeting that will remain. I don't know.
Oh, no, it's one way.
One direction, right, but it's not going
But
away.
let me interrupt you. So what we're doing first is you're going to introduce the matter, and then we're going to, because it's like a motion. So you're going to introduce it, then you'll get a second on it, and then we'll open it up for discussion. So you have to introduce the B.
Okay, you just want me to introduce the subject line.
Okay. Yeah, as much detail as you want to give, and then you can explain your questions or ask your questions, but we need a motion.
Sure. On the agenda tonight for discussion is a resolution approving an agreement with the Illinois Department of Transportation for improvements related to the intersection of East Avenue and 47th. And the separate, but kind of tied to it, resolution is a funding resolution pertaining to the agreement with the Illinois Department of Transportation for improvements related to the intersection at East and 47th. Should I do those separately? Okay, so for the first one, again, I'd like to propose, I'd like to open up for discussion this first resolution approving an agreement with the Illinois Department of Transportation for improvements related to the intersection at East and 47th.
Okay, and we need a second?
Well, we need a motion to approve, not just introduction. So we would need a motion to approve the resolution approving the agreement with IDOT.
I'll make the motion. I mean, a motion to approve the resolution for the agreement with IDOT for the improvements at East Avenue and 47th Street.
Thank you, Trustee Gale, and a second.
Second.
Thank you, Trustee McGee. With that, Trustee Augustine, questions or comments?
Right. You know, I guess my questions, as I mentioned a moment ago, I have not seen a picture of what the design will look like, and what Public Works Director Colby was able to show me tonight was something from 2021. So we're pretty sure it's going to look something like that, but I haven't seen anything recently, and I'm just a bit concerned that we're voting on something a bit early. And one of the things that I think I've seen on those drawings, and I want to confirm, is that we are going to have sidewalks that continue from Bluff and 47th across the tracks, because we don't have any pedestrian pathway, bike pathway there. And I wanted to be sure that that was taking place. So, and is there any land, are there any land changes associated with that spur that goes off south onto East Avenue from 47th? So I guess I generally just wanted to understand what the plan was. We really haven't talked about it in depth, and I needed to understand it more thoroughly. We couldn't just vote for it as a consent item.
So, Director Colby, I don't know if you're prepared to fill in any more details at this time.
Yeah, no, yeah, happy to provide the pre-final plans if the board is interested in seeing those. Again, they are from 2021. I don't think they've changed significantly since that point. The matter this evening is related to improvements that the village is responsible for. There are other elements of that plan that are being kind of mentioned and discussed that are outside of the specific funding that are part of this. But yeah, happy to, if that's a request, to get those plans together, see if there's more updated or more current. They do, yeah, that's the latest pre-final they've shared. We do have sidewalk on the north and the west sides of East Avenue, so there is a continuity in connecting of pedestrian flow to the park and around to the rec center. That was coordinated between those various projects. There's signalization, electrical improvements, lighting improvements that are a part of this work, which is primarily what the funding set is set for.
And are you comfortable with not seeing a more updated version of the plan, or is it something we should just double check, ask, and wait till next meeting to vote on?
I'm actually comfortable with the level of improvement and coordination between the sidewalk. That's a comment we've been tracking for 7-8 years. It predates me. It's something we've had continuity through the various iterations of this to ensure that we've kind of stressed the need for that pedestrian connection as best as we can. It's a challenging intersection, lots of geometric challenges to say the least. So there, to be clear, there's not pedestrian connections on the south or the west. So, but there isn't any existing sidewalk further south as it currently stands. But we will be able to come down East Avenue and make a right turn and head west on 47th Street, be able to connect to our existing sidewalk. My level of comfort is pretty severe.
Okay.
Any other, Trustee Gallup?
So Rick, since you've got the microphone, in both B and C, we'll get to C too. There's reference to these grants that we've gotten. Are those covering all of our costs? Like, are we out anything out of pocket from the village's point of view?
So there's several different funding mechanisms at play here. There's funds from MI Homes. There's funds from an existing grant that's actually due to expire. Trying to work with the state to figure out how to either obligate or extend that. There's also a separate grant that was existing that hasn't been released from the state yet. So we've been consistently asking the state for updated costs. Some of their costs our concern is a little bit delayed. We want to make sure we have the most current construction costs, but there's more than enough funds set aside through those different funding grant mechanisms to cover the expenses that we plan as of today.
Okay. And then these are both state roads, right?
Correct.
I mean, so
state
our...
and then county to the north, but the improvements being driven by IDOT.
Wait, say that again?
The county owned further north.
Oh, okay.
But this is an IDOT project.
Yeah, okay. And so, I mean, our ability to impact this is limited, right? Like, if we were to, somehow vote no here or say no, the state would be like, okay, that's great. And then they would, probably build it anyway?
We have no direct control over the project.
Yeah,
as
okay.
Partner projects, and through our citizenry, we advocate and voice the concerns. I do believe the current view of this project is a little bit of a function of that.
Right.
There were different alternatives pursued previously, but we don't have a direct control. This board doesn't have the control to dictate how this should or should.
Yeah. Okay.
This is really, do you want improvements such as emergency lighting on the street lights, which we very much
would want
to have.
Right. Okay, thanks.
And I had just one
Trustee
further
Augustine, sure.
And I would agree, we don't have a lot of, can't make a lot of change here, but we did make a pretty significant change in relation to the Illinois Harbor Belt tracks not too long ago. And we made sure there was a sidewalk there, and that wasn't initially part of their plan. So I have to say that's what's really been fresh in my mind in bringing this up, because I haven't seen the plan. So if you're comfortable with it, I am. And then I had another funding question, but I would save it for the related resolution.
To C?
Yeah.
So no more questions. I'm up. Trustee Thompson.
None.
Just one question on the emergency lighting. That's for when a police car or a fire truck or an ambulance is going to come through that intersection, it turns the signaling on?
Correct.
I kind of find it interesting, just a side note, most of the ambulances use that intersection are not from the village of LaGrange. Why do we have to pay for it, not McCook, Brookfield, all those other towns that are using that crossing to get to the hospital? It seems like that we're being asked to pick up a bigger share of the cost of this intersection than we actually control. And that's just, I realize it's all covered by grants, but the ambulances coming into town are not our ambulances come that way. So just curious why we're paying such a bigger share of it.
No, typically where that cost breakdown is where the controls and where the signals live. That makes sense. So this is a joint project between Brookfield, us, and then where the various controllers or signals exist is who covers the expense.
Trustee Peterson?
Can you repeat Glenn's question and your response? Glenn, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
I'll summarize
Okay,
it.
Thank you.
Trustee Thompson, and correct me if I'm wrong, Trustee Thompson indicated that his observation is most of the ambulances that are traveling through that intersection are traveling from the east to the west, probably to LaGrange Hospital. And since they're not LaGrange emergency vehicles, why should LaGrange pay for this, the emergency lighting? Director Colby explained that most towns pay for what exists in their town. And so we do have visitors and others that use our streetlights, but we provide the streetlights in our town, I think was a summary of what.
Thank you.
And with that, I would ask colleague Saladino to call a roll call vote.
Trustee Peterson?
Aye.
Trustee Thompson?
Aye. Aye.
Trustee Augustine?
Aye.
Trustee McGee?
Aye.
Trustee Gale?
Aye.
And that passes unanimously. Moving on to C, Trustee Augustine, if you could introduce that.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is a funding resolution pertaining to the agreement with the Illinois Department of Transportation for the improvements related to the intersection of East Avenue and 47th.
And do you have questions or comments on C?
Can I go right into it? Oh, yes. Well, not much.
Oh, I'm sorry, you can't. We need a motion and a second. I apologize.
Yeah.
I make a motion to approve the funding resolution for 47th and East.
And a second?
Second.
Thank you, trustees.
Okay, thank you. So begun to address it a moment ago. It was the funding model. You know, as I look at it, and Rick, you're probably aware of this. This intersection. So the IHB tracks go through LaGrange. That part of things is in LaGrange. The rail line goes through LaGrange. A lot of the work to the rail line and the signalization is spread across 3 towns, but the way the road works is most of it is in LaGrange. So the south sides of East Avenue on the east and west are LaGrange, and then all of 47th south of the intersection, and then the northwest is Brookfield, and the northeast is McCook. So 3 towns where this signalization touches. But it's not spread evenly across the 3 towns, and I guess that is because it looks like they just divided the pie up. So it looks like we're paying about twice the amount. Looks like Brookfield's paying the least amount for this portion, $85,100. Village of McCook, $202,400, and then the Village of LaGrange is being asked to pay $282,900, and it does look like we have a good deal of funding for that. But it seems to me if you add the Brookfield and McCook up, then that's pretty close to what we're paying. So it's half and half. Is that what they've done?
Yeah, so again, the LaGrange is bordering this on the northwest and the southwest, where Brookfield's to the northeast and McCook's to the southeast, right? So if it's 4 quadrants, half of the pie is ours. But really, as I understand it, where the infrastructure lives, the controllers, the signals, really what's driven by where the controller is where the cost ultimately gets assigned. And so, yeah, based on kind of where that's dictated in the plans, based on what's capable, that's who kind of owns that piece of it.
And that controller has to be in LaGrange?
We can go back and advocate for the state to place everything in a different part,
No.
but I'm sure
If it's already there.
Our counterparts, villages will have a similar argument
Right.
countering ours. But
If there are if there are matters that take this beyond our anticipated budget, is there a way to have conversations with our neighboring villages to see if they'll chip in a bit more on that? I mean, can we at least open those lines, or does that seem unreasonable? since we all use it pretty equally, and I would say that the majority of the heavy stuff is coming from McCook. It's, 12 years ago, there wasn't this giant industrial park coming down our way with all of these trucks. So now we've got this really busy, heavy, dangerous intersection. And a lot of that impact is not problematic from LaGrange origin. So it just seems like it'd be something worth asking those villages about.
No, yeah, I hear the comments loud and clear. I think we can continue to explore any opportunities to minimize funding that impacts ours. Ideally, right, where we have funds that are specifically legally obligated to that, it makes sense to spend them in those purposes because we can't use them for anything else. In the event that those don't, it is a little bit of a different conversation and need to advocate for those types of changes. No problem doing that.
Thank you, Rick. That's it for me.
Any other comments with regard to C?
Just one question. The money from MI Homes, is that a grant that originally came over when they built that neighborhood and they put that money aside?
So as a planned development, the development was required to provide compensating amenities to the community for the relief that it was afforded through the planned development process. So there was a package of things that was included. One component of that was a cash contribution toward the intersection improvements at 47th and East. Also, as part of that, we did look at the plans for the sidewalks that IDOT was proposing as part of the overall project, worked with MI Homes to be able to provide more of our typical parkway standard in that area along 47th Street versus the carriage walk that IDOT had originally planned because of the constraints of the grading as it was and what IDOT would be able to do within the existing right-of-way. Through that opportunity we had with the development, we were able to adjust those grades and make it a much nicer pedestrian experience.
And just for the people in the audience or at home, MI Homes was the developer of the townhouse and single-family development at 47th and East. As Assistant Village Manager Jones said, it was a planned development, and we were entitled to ask for contributions to the public good, and they contributed money that is being used for sidewalks and other matters in that intersection. Any other trustee questions before I would ask for a vote on the motion?
Trustee McGee.
Aye.
Trustee Augustine.
Aye.
Trustee Peterson.
Aye.
Trustee Gale.
Aye.
Trustee Thompson.
Aye.
And that passes unanimously. And that, I guess we're already in current business, so we'll move right along. The next matter is an ordinance amending various sections of the Code of Ordinances to establish an administrative hearing system. An administrative hearing system has been a priority for the board. Without a hearing system in place, parking, minor traffic violations, and police-related ordinance violations are currently considered in the 5th District Municipal Courthouse, and fines exacted in these cases are distributed to the village only after the court and county deducts their costs and fees. So what our police officers write a ticket, the judge enters a fine, and by the time it gets to us, there's very little of that fine left. An administrative hearing system would provide an alternate to the violations being heard at the courthouse. Through an administrative hearing system, a village-appointed hearing officer would consider these violations and issue a judgment. Having this process in place will offer a more accessible, effective, and less complicated alternative to proceedings before a circuit court judge. It will also assist in enforcement of ordinance violations that might not otherwise be pursued in the circuit court because sometimes they're just too expensive. And so we haven't been writing necessarily those violations. With this in place, we'll be more inclined, staff will be more inclined to write those violations, and we'll be able to do better enforcement. In addition, by negating court fees, the village would collect fines in their entirety, which would provide revenue to sustain the administrative hearing system. Pursuing the establishment of the system, the village has partnered with the Village of LaGrange Park. The partnership has allowed each village to pursue the solution together, which might otherwise be unattainable separately due to the associated costs. A first step in the process of implementing an administrative hearing system will be the adoption of the attached proposed ordinance establishing the process within the village code of ordinances. From there, an update to the village's fine and fees to establish a standardized fine structure for violations, a prepayment option to avoid a required appearance at the adjudication hearing, and other changes to ensure compliance with state regulations and current best practices are necessary. Beyond that, an intergovernmental agreement formalizing the partnership with Grange Park, as well as several logistical pieces, need to be arranged. Once an administrative hearing process is implemented, it will allow for cases to proceed in the following manner. A person receiving a citation may pay the established fine prior to the administrative hearing date. Prepayment of the fine will close the case and the attendance at the hearing would not be required. A payment hearing reminder will also be sent to the violator prior to the hearing date. Failure to pay a fine prior to the hearing date and failing to appear at a hearing may result in an administrative hearing officer entering a finding of default and imposing liability against the violator, including the assessment of fines up to the maximum permitted for each violation plus administrative costs. A copy of the finding of default, which is a final determination, shall be sent promptly to the violator by first-class mail, postage prepaid, and shall apprise the violator of the procedure for setting aside the finding of default pursuant to the village ordinance and the availability of an appeal finding of default to the Circuit Court of Cook County. If the violator fails to comply with the judgment imposing any fine, including the village's administrative costs, after they are fixed by a court of competent jurisdiction or by a hearing officer in accordance with the village ordinance, the full amount shall be a debt due and owing the village and may be collected in accordance with applicable law. After extensive study and a review of the administrative hearing system, staff has determined that establishing a system for enforcement of certain village ordinances and regulations best serves our community and helps fulfill the safe, accessible, and engaged community strategic priority in the 2024-27 strategic plan. Therefore, staff recommends approval of the proposed ordinance amending various sections of the Code of Ordinances of the Village of LaGrange to establish an administrative hearing system. And before I ask for a motion, Council, could you advise, it's my understanding that these violations are considered a civil violation, not a criminal violation.
That is correct.
So just so it's clear, if you get a ticket now by our police, it goes to the circuit court, moving violations, things of those, they can be viewed as criminal. We're not allowed to administratively review moving violations. There's specific things we're allowed to, and we'll be working to see which ordinance violations can go under administrative adjudication versus which ones go to the circuit court. But anything that goes to administrative hearings is considered a civil matter. If you don't pay, it's a civil judgment against you. With that, I would entertain a motion to approve an ordinance amending various sections of the Code of Ordinances.
A motion to approve.
Second.
Thank you, Trustee Augustine, Trustee McGee. Any discussion on that? Trustee Thompson.
So thank you, President Kugler. And your comment just brought up a question. So we will not be using this for speeding tickets.
We're prohibited by law.
Okay. But if you have, and I don't want to bring any disparagement to anybody that formerly owned a building, but the building code violations at the Nixon building, can those be brought up through this process and raise fines on those?
Correct. Property maintenance, code enforcement can go through the adjudication process.
Okay. Very good.
And some towns are very creative in what the police can write as an administrative hearing also. So we'll look at that. Any other questions on that? Would Trustee Peterson?
Yes, and I was
into the microphone, though.
I was directing my question to Chief Griffin. So I was reading that you will be responsible for assigning a hearing room personnel to be designated and appointed by the village chief of police and shall be authorized and directed to maintain hearing room decorum, execute authority as is granted in courtroom deputies of the Circuit Court of Cook County, and perform other duties. So my question was, will that be a police officer? What was that? Okay, thank you.
Seeing no other questions, I would ask Clerk Saladino for a roll call vote.
Trustee Gale.
Aye.
Trustee Peterson.
Aye.
Trustee Thompson.
Aye.
Trustee McGee. And Trustee Augustine.
Aye.
And that matter passes unanimously. Moving on to item B, I would ask Trustee Gale to introduce that.
Thank you, Mr. President. So this is an ordinance approving an amendment to a special use for a plan development, an amendment to a final development plan, an amendment to a site plan, and modifications from the zoning code for 561 to 601 West Hillgrove Avenue, otherwise known as the Gray Hill location. So Gray Hill Incorporated is the owner of the manufacturing company's campus located in the village's West End Commercial District at that address I just gave, which is our subject property. The applicant is requesting 1, an amendment to a plan development, 2, special use permit, 3, site plan approval, and 4, zoning map amendment. Gray Hill operates their company headquarters within the office building located at the northeast corner of Stone Avenue and Hillgrove. A processing, assembly, and shipping receiving work are housed within the buildings directly to the east. The subject property also includes multiple adjacent surface parking lots, including a lot on the west side of Stone Avenue. So Gray Hill's history in the village dates back to 1944. In 1967, Gray Hill was granted a variance, O-67-11, to allow the extension of its processing and assembly of electronic equipment and components. In 1974, the applicant was further granted a special use permit to allow them to continue those operations. Then in 1976, a special use permit was granted for Gray Hill's off-site visitor parking lot located just south of the Stone Park. In 1982, special use permit for a plan development and site plan approval were granted to allow the construction of a new office building with structured parking garage and surface parking lots. Then in the 1980s, expansion also included the village's vacation of a portion of Wyola Avenue to allow the construction of a landscaped walkway that exists in between the office building and the buildings to the east. Other portions of the subject property are not included in Gray Hill's previous zoning approvals. The current application results from minor proposed improvements on the subject property that require amendments to the prior approvals. It has also provided the opportunity for the village and the applicant to update and clarify the property's historical zoning entitlements. In late 2022, the village became aware that both ground and roof-mounted mechanical equipment were installed on the property without a building permit, with 2 ground air conditioning units installed in the parking lot north of the manufacturing and assembly building. The parking lot is regulated by the 1982 Plan Development and Site Plan. As such, an amendment to these zoning approvals is required. Gray Hill is also seeking to construct a 6-foot-tall ornamental fence on an irregularly shaped parcel located south of the Stone Avenue visitor parking lot, which has frontage on both Stone Avenue and Hillgrove Avenue and intends to convert the existing gravel lot to grass. Also presently, no signage exists on the property except for a window sign on the front entrance. 2 new wall signs on the office building for identification, a monument sign to direct visitors to the visitor parking lot, and 2 wall signs on the shipping receiving building are what's being proposed. Approving of a zoning map amendment is also being sought to rezone the Stone Avenue visitor parking lot from R8 multifamily residential to C2 West End commercial to harmonize with the balance of the subject property. The application was considered by the Plan Commission on February 13th, 2024. 6 members of the public provided comment with concerns over noise and existing fence conditions raised. Others praised portions of the property's landscaping and offered recommendations for additional improvements. The commissioners generally supported the proposal, but recommended that the applicant work with staff to improve or remediate any excessive noise. The commissioners were also supportive of the sign plan and stressed the importance of the proposed fence to blend softly with the character of the block. After deliberation, the Plan Commission voted 6-0 to recommend the application with the following conditions. Screening of the ground-mounted utility equipment seen from Hillgrove Avenue in front of the shipping receiving building. Screening of the refuse area seen from Hillgrove Avenue in front of the shipping and receiving building. Submittal of a landscape plan and approval by staff to accompany the installation of the proposed fence and ground sign. Submittal of a declaration of covenants, conditions, and restrictions between the subject property's 2 legal entities to the village. The fence along Hillgrove must be set back a minimum of less than 3 feet from the south front property line, and adequate testing and addressing noise concerns by working with the village staff in a manner that is reasonably acceptable to the applicant and the village with an improved enclosure. Since the Plan Commission meeting, staff and the applicant have addressed the Commission's concerns and the attached ordinance for the board's consideration. Conditions regarding the utility equipment screening, landscape plan, and fence setback have been addressed. Under the proposed ordinance, the applicant has 90 days to submit the necessary documentation to satisfy the conditions regarding unified property control. Applicant concerns regarding the condition of screening the refuse area have also been coordinated by the village fire inspector and will instead be addressed by repainting the brown refuse compactor. The structure is non-conforming, and upon its replacement, the new structure will be required to come into compliance with the zoning code and the location and screening requirements. So after a review of a variety of industry standard frameworks to objectively measure sound, the village's consulting engineer recommended using a simplified equivalent A-weighted decibel limitation. That limitation is used when human being hearing is considered. So staff recommends the subject property's daytime noise be limited to 62 decibels and 55 decibels during nighttime hours as measured at the property line. Staff has worked with the village attorney in developing the attached ordinance. And with all that, I move for acceptance of the ordinance as presented in our package.
Thank you, Trustee Gale. And a second?
Second.
Thank you, Trustee Peterson. We do have a representative from Gray Hill here. We appreciate you coming out tonight. We also appreciate the investment that Gray Hill has made and continues to make in our village. With that, any trustee comments? Trustee Thompson.
Just a couple of questions, President
Sure.
So and I'm confused over this land. So the white masonry building looks like a garage just behind Antonio's restaurant. Is that Gray Hill property or not Gray Hill property?
Correct. That's Gray Hill's property.
Okay, so do y'all use that building or not use that building? You do use it. The property that Antonio's has been using as their outdoor dining since COVID, that's where you're going to build the fence across? They're no longer going to use that property?
Correct. That's Gray Hill's property as well.
Okay.
And that's what is gravel and will be converted into green space.
Okay. And Antonio's is okay. I guess they had an agreement
No,
there.
Gray Hill's.
They're okay losing it?
They don't own it.
Well, I know, but it seemed like, was there never an agreement for them to use it in the past? Is that what happened?
They probably had an agreement to use it, right?
But
They don't have an agreement to use it any longer.
any longer, okay. What's the reason driving that to give up? I mean, we had an outdoor dining area for a place that seems to be pretty popular in the village. Why would
I think you have to ask either Director Jones or we could ask Gray Hill to come up to answer questions
So
also.
I can't speak to the arrangements between the two private property owners. I can say that the outdoor dining that was in place that Antonino's was doing during the COVID period were under the COVID provisions that we allowed for temporarily and aren't the typical outdoor dining that is permitted in the village on public sidewalks or other hard surfaces that meet other requirements.
And they had code violations and things, not enough bathrooms for the amount of space.
Okay.
And not handicap accessible and other things.
Just if it was going to be a longer term solution, there would probably have been more investments that would have been required.
Okay, thank you.
Trustee Augustine.
Thank you, Mr. President. First of all, Gray Hill's been a great partner to the Grange. Been here a long, long time. I think they go relatively unnoticed. They mow their lawn. It looks nice. They keep the place up. So it makes sense that they're coming before us to solidify the plan on their properties. I learned something new with this one, though, and that is that they own those properties, one of which Trustee Thompson was just discussing, which I think is 707 Hillgrove. So question, and this was also one of the most complicated ordinances I've ever read, and I was asking Ben if he could help me before the meeting. It's a big one. There's a lot to it. I've never seen something that had air conditioning covers, fences, signs, and vacated parts of property in it. And I'll ask about that later. But the 707 space on Hillgrove, which is, our lovely West End that's been developing and improving, and growing so much lately. And it was really neat to see Antonino's utilize that space uniquely, I'm sure with permission, during COVID. But I guess what are the plans for, and I'm glad you're here, what are the plans for that space? That's a retail revenue that we don't get because it's just an empty lot. Now we're going to put a wrought iron fence up and some grass. Well, that's good because that'll take in some water. But what's the long-term plan for that property? Seems like if it's not being utilized, perhaps could it be put on the market so that we could have a continuous line of businesses on that block? And I'm sure you can answer that. You probably have the answer to that question. But that seems to me to be a great use of that property rather than just let it sit vacant. It kind of looks like a problem. Kind of looks like it's an area of town that can't be, that isn't interesting to a developer, and I think it's quite the contrary. So I'd kind of like to know that, and also, I mean, the fence will make it look better, but that doesn't really solve the problem. And I don't understand the vacated area at the end of Stone where it kind of dead ends with the other part of the street. And maybe Charity, that's something you could explain. I'm sorry, I don't have the page number. I can find it in a second. Page, in Book 2, 7B, page 52. It's a purple area of Gray Hill property, and then there's a rectangle that says in red, desired vacation.
Absolutely. So that's from the Plan Commission staff memo. One of the things that we noted with the Plan Commission is that Gray Hill, has that parking area on both sides of Stone Avenue. They have expressed some interest in making improvements to the condition of that dead-end street, which of course ranks very low on our resurfacing plans because of total traffic volume and the fact that it is a dead-end street. So village staff is exploring the potential of a license agreement or vacation of a portion of that right-of-way, which we would bring forward to the village board for consideration, because aside from some underground utilities, the village has no other public purpose for it, given that Gray Hill owns on both sides. It's not a part of this ordinance. Yes, to clarify, thank you, Rick.
Okay.
It's not a part of this ordinance.
All right.
It's just something that is mentioned as context in the staff memo.
Okay. We're not selling that or transferring that
Not
land.
currently, no. We're having conversations with Gray Hill about opportunities either for a potential vacation or license agreement or something in place, because they are currently occupying and have since the 80s a portion of the village's right-of-way, and would like to see some improvements made to that right-of-way in the asphalt condition.
Okay. One other thing, and this is really just hitting me tonight, as that area is popular, it's got a few restaurants and commuters. Has there ever, and this is, you don't have to answer this question, but I'd be interested. We're partnering with a lot of entities around the village where extra parking is needed, and I'm just wondering if that surface lot that you have off Stone could ever be used for overflow parking for some of the businesses in the area that evening. I'm sure that would have to be something legally worked out, but we're always looking for creative spaces, and if that's something that is not utilized after hours, just think about that as something that possibly the village could work out an agreement with you on if we could ever utilize that extra space, which I think from time to time we could really use. And I would love to hear what the plan is for that 707 Hillgrove, if that could be answered.
Sure, that'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Scott Harrison. I'm the CEO and president of Gray Hill Incorporated. As mentioned, we're located at 561 to 601 to 707 West Hillgrove. We also have 14 North Stone. The property to answer your question, Trustee Augustine, the property at 707 West Hillgrove actually has a white garage. I think Trustee Thompson mentioned it. We currently use that for warehousing. It is actively being used. The neighbors around us can comment that over the last year, there's been much upkeep and maintenance done to that building. It was overtaken by vines. We removed the vines, replaced the roof, painted the building, and we're now actively using it for warehousing. We do work for the Department of Defense, among many other things, and we have certain requirements, and one of the reasons for the fence is to maintain the security of that property. We've had prowlers recently, and when the tent was there for the restaurant, we had lots of issues and paraphernalia accumulating in that kind of screened off area. And there was also a lot of overgrowth. The salon, I think it's Silver Moon Salon is next to us. In cooperation with the salon and ourselves, we removed the landscaping, improved the existing fence, and did some repaving. So we're continuing to improve the lot. We plan to keep 707 West Hill Grove. The owners of Gray Hill do not have a desire to divest a property. In fact, they would be more interested in acquiring property than divesting it. So did that answer your question?
Thank you. Any other questions?
Yeah, it definitely answered the question, but it kind of raised another one for me. So the access to the garage that you're talking to is mainly achieved through a driveway off Stone.
North Stone Avenue.
But
that's correct.
it's connected to that lot on Hillgrove then. So
That's
that's a pretty deep lot. Would there be any potential for fencing, splitting up the property and doing something with the property rather than just leaving it a hole, just leaving it vacant on Hillgrove? I'm sure you can appreciate what it might look like if we could use it for a business versus just a fenced off open space. Or maybe it's a park, I don't know.
Currently, we have no plans to divest our property.
Would you be open to talking about it?
Yes, of course.
That's all. Thanks, I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Augustine. Any other questions, comments? Trustee Gale.
Thank you, Mr. President. So these are, I think, for charity. So how will the noise concerns be handled? So somebody goes out there with a meter and measures, and so how does that work?
Sure, absolutely. So as noted in the board report, we worked closely with a specialist consultant from Christopher Burke Engineering to assist us in developing a noise standard that would make sense for the very unique Gray Hill property. It's obviously much larger than most of our commercial sites, has a very large parking lot. So these standards represent a quantifiable noise level that can be measured with a sound meter, but don't require highly specialized technicians. We could have a representative from our consulting engineer come out. They could even train village staff on how to use the appropriate equipment if necessary to take noise measurements. Gray Hill's been very committed and a cooperative partner in developing the appropriate plans and doing whatever's necessary for sound mitigation.
And then if there's a violation, right, we go through just our normal process, right? Probably pick up the phone, hey, there's an issue.
Right, correct.
Yeah, okay.
And that's why we spent a little time to make sure that we had the standard crafted appropriately, that it wasn't too overly technical to be able to do those evaluations. At some point in the future, if we do get complaints, then Gray Hill or the village isn't investing significant resources just to determine compliance.
All right, great, thanks. And then one other, so I got it all right and all that stuff I had to read and everything we had to absorb. So at the Hillgrove and I think it's the Spring Avenue corner where sort of the receiving, right, the shipping receiving is, right? So we're not going to do the landscaping for now, right? That was just not practical, or did I?
Right, so there's an existing trash compactor in that area that originally we asked to be screened after evaluating. There's really no way to physically incorporate screening without further impeding ingress and egress into that building. So in conversations with the fire department, we determined that wasn't really feasible. Gray Hill instead is going to paint that, and then it's just understood that if and when that trash compactor is replaced, it will need to be put in a compliant location with the appropriate screening.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Thank you, Trustee Gale. Trustee Thompson.
Just one last question. So that section that's in red on North Stone Avenue, that's going to be brought up at another
That is
time.
not under consideration this evening.
But that'll come back before us, whatever proposal comes out of that.
Correct. We are working with our engineers to just evaluate what our underground infrastructure looks like in that area right now, and that's currently where we're at.
Seeing no other trustee comments, I'd ask Clerk Saladino for a roll call vote.
Trustee Thompson.
Aye.
Trustee McGee. Trustee Augustine.
Aye.
Trustee Peterson.
Aye.
And Trustee Gale.
Aye.
And that passes unanimously. Moving on, that concludes our current business. We're to public comments regarding matters not on tonight's agenda. John, come on up.
Are they going to do any improvements for the drainage at that corner?
IDOT is doing improvements to the drainage, but that's not part of BNC.
Okay, well, I just see that they're going to do work there. I just hate to see them put all that stuff in and then come tear it up later. That's my question. So you guys got that under control?
As much as control we have of IDOT.
Okay, because here's the picture that is related to it. And if you want, I can give it to you.
If you want me to look at it, feel free to give it to me.
Obviously, you don't pay attention to it when I do give it to you, because I gave it to you once before.
Okay.
Now, the other issue is our MS4 program with the state. And I went to one of their brochures, and maybe you guys can explain this to me. Why did we do the parking lot? And I know this isn't part of your jurisdiction, but you approve it. Why didn't we do that parking lot over there in permeable pavers?
Well, I'm not sure which parking lot you're speaking of.
The big parking lot at 536 East Avenue. And here, maybe I'll just go all the way along with it and explain it to you. Those storm sewers over there dump into the deep tunnel, which is the same sewers that come from Cossett Avenue sewer. Okay, so if we could have taken some of the load, the storm load, off of off that parking lot, that little Elm parking lot is supposed to hold 37,000 gallons of water. What would that parking lot over there contributed to? It could have given a less impact on the other combined sewers further up the road. So I'm kind of disappointed that if we're going to go green, let's go green. I think we made a mistake there. The other item at hand is our park district once again. I have here in my hand the Anderson safety data sheet for the fertilizer herbicides that they spread on all the parks in this town. And it's kind of disturbing because Sedgwick Park, where I live, has one flag in an inconspicuous place when they go through and do their program. Now, there's some safety hazards to this. And I walk my dogs through there. And I think I talked with Eric over at the Park District, and I said, I think you have to come up with a comprehensive plan of tagging more than one place in a park that size. So I'm going to give you all this information. It's also got the state of Illinois information about what you're supposed to do. And I'd like you to post this on the minutes so that anybody else that walks their dogs or are in the parks in LaGrange knows what was put on that park. Because some of the chemicals in the herbicide are dangerous, okay? And what else? I think that's it.
All right, thank you for sharing. Thank you for coming out. I'm competent as far as that goes. But you can't, you got to talk into the microphone if you want people to hear you.
I figure you people can enforce it because I've complained for 5 years and it hasn't made a difference.
Right, but you do recognize they're separate board.
I understand that, but you guys are in charge of the safety of this village. You have a community development officer that can relate to that, right? Doesn't he handle health issues?
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
No, thank you. Anyone else? Seeing none. Trustee comments. Trustee Gale.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just wanted to take a moment to recognize the passing of Karen Yarbrough, who was the Cook County clerk. She was a friend, somebody I'd gotten to know over the last few years, and on an occasion where we had to also recognize some of our officers, it reminded me of just wanting to take the time to recognize her as well. A valued public servant who I got to know well, and who I think was somebody that will be missed. So, thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Gale. Seeing no other comments, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye for a motion to adjourn at 9:29.
Aye.
Any opposed? And that passes. Thank you. We will be back in 2 weeks.